Hello and welcome to the Junk to Jewels podcast with Georgette Beck. I have the awesome honor of introducing you to our guest today. He's my favoriteest person in the whole wide world. He's my best friend, and he's my mate and my hubby, Scott Beck. This is a guy who came into my life, perfect timing. And I had prayed for a second chance for family, for love, for romance, for a lot of years. After my first marriage ended in divorce, I was very lonely. I was sad. I was depressed. And we had a lot of brokenness to work through and heal. And that will be shared on this podcast and in my book that's coming out called Junk to Jewels, A Journey from Brokenness and Despair to Beauty and Delight, that documents the greatest love story after God's love story with Jesus. It's the greatest love story I experienced personally, how God showed up in my life. But today's show is about the man that God brought to me. He's a gift. He's a treasure. And when God answers prayers, believe me, it's top notch. It's quality all the way. And ladies, guys, if you're still single and praying for that second chance, third chance, or what have you, or someone special to come into your life and do life with, don't settle. Don't settle, don't settle, don't settle. Wait. Waiting on God for his answer, for the one he selects, is worth it. I can't even tell you how just profound he goes to the details on matching us with someone so perfect for us. And no, there's no relationship that's perfect and without trouble or heartache or pain. Life is full of mixed blessings. There's good and there's sad and happy, sad, good, bad. Life is mixed like that. But this person fits with me so perfectly. It's beautiful. It is beyond describing, really. His story is so powerful. Heads up on the content. There are some triggers for those who have experienced any kind of trauma in their past. So please be prepared. He's quite vulnerable and shares his heart with much courage. He has come and shared with you today because we all know the importance of storytelling and story sharing, because when we hear someone else's story, it helps us no matter where we are in life. Sometimes our experiences are similar with others and only they understand, and only we understand someone if we've been through it. So Scott shares information about his childhood, something he experienced as a little boy, and it does involve abuse. So heads up, please be careful and proceed with caution on that one. But the rest, oh my gosh, there's miracle after miracle he shares, divine appointments. It is beautiful and it's amazing. And please know, God has a plan for your life. There is a plan and a purpose. So welcome to the show, and I'm so glad I get to introduce my best friend in the whole wide world, Scott Beck. Enjoy. Well, hello there, everyone. Hello, Scott Beck. How are you?
Well, Georgette, how are you?
Here is someone that I know very, very, very well. Scott is my second chance guy. He's the second chance marriage and a chance of hope and romance and family that you guys will get to know along the way. This podcast, as you know, is inspired by Junk to Jewels, Brokenness, A Journey from Brokenness and Despair to Beauty and Delight book project. The book that's being published soon, or if not already, the time you listen to this. And this is the man God brought to my daughter, Jessica, and I. So I'm going to introduce him. He's going to introduce himself more so. He's going to share about his life. And he humbly said yes to coming and being a guest on this podcast. And he's laughing because maybe he's, why are you laughing? Do you want to say? Go ahead.
No, just not real used to talking about myself. So all good.
I love it. And we have so much similarity and so much things of the heart that are so similar. And yet there's some things that are totally opposite. And that's normal and okay in a lot of couples and relationships, I'd say.
It's been a good ride.
And we've been married 19 and a half.
Yeah, almost 20. Yeah.
Yes. So God is good. And those second chances, we're going to talk about them a lot. But today's interview is about Scott. And this story is all about him and his journey with God. And he has his own journey from brokenness and despair to beauty and delight, beauty from ashes. So Scott, without further ado, would you go ahead and share some of who you are, where you come from, your family, and just some of your upbringing a bit, and then bring us into some of the moments, the valleys and the mountains and the valleys, and just some things that are on your heart to share.
Well, to be quite honest, I don't see myself as having a great testimony, but I have seen God do tremendous things. And, my childhood, I grew up in Hollywood, Florida. It was really wonderful. My mom and dad were awesome. My brother Walt, my sister Lynn, close family, very close aunts and uncles, very close cousins, a lot of love, tremendous amount of love, and just a really happy time in my life. We were very, very blessed. Started in the Lutheran church when I was very young and stayed in the Lutheran church up into my 40s, but we'll talk more about that later. It's funny though how I never knew God.
All the time throughout the
church, my whole life, and never had a relationship with God. Understood religion, but just didn't understand God. So, we were very close community where I grew up in Hollywood. A lot of neighbors that were more like family and friends. The only downside of my childhood, I was changed pretty dramatically when I was about 7. I was molested by actually, I've never told this to anybody publicly. So you're one of only like 2 people in this world that have ever heard this story. So this is going out on a limb, and I'm not real comfortable on it. But I was molested by an older neighbor when I was 7. And I remember telling my mom, and she went down and confronted the family. And shortly after she confronted the family, like within a couple of weeks, they were gone. They moved. They were down living in another region of Florida and disappeared. And, I never really paid much attention to it after that. I didn't really think it had any profound effects or any significant effects until later in my life. And I recognized the fact. So let me jump ahead here. I recognized the fact that it had a significant impact on my professional life much later in life. I became an expert in crimes against children, conducted hundreds of investigations in which the subjects were kids and they were victims of either physical abuse or sexual abuse or death. And I never realized how that impacted that situation when I was so young, provided such a passion and a fire to help others who had navigated those same waters. So it was very interesting looking back in retrospect. You never really understand why God allows the things that he allows until you look back in retrospect and you go, all right, now I understand why you allowed the things that you allowed. Mm-hmm. So, I never really thought too much about it. Like I said, had a great childhood, really close. My brother Walt's 10 years older than I am. My sister Lynn's 15 years older than I am. I was an oops child. And we had a very close relationship. My father worked a lot, so my brother Walt took on much more of a father role. And my sister Lynn was always like a second mom. We're still very, very close. I love them dearly. And so did a lot of stuff with Walt growing up through his teenage years. and
fishing, scuba diving,
yeah, all
boating,
kinds of things. We did a lot of fun stuff, had a lot of great experiences. And I was fortunate enough that my mom and dad bought a place in Jensen Beach, a little vacation home, because they really couldn't afford it, but they did it anyways, which
took a jump of
faith.
as they say.
Yes. And we ended up in Jensen Beach, Florida.
And you were 10?
I was 11 when we purchased the place on Nettles Island, and we commuted back and forth every weekend. My father at that point in time was working for the school board. My mom was also working for the school board in Broward County, and we would commute on the weekends. And in the summer times, they had long periods off in the summertime, and we would come up and spend the summers. My mom and I would spend the summer. She was teaching. My dad would go back and forth to work during the week. And yeah, it was a wonderful life. Lots of freedom. Yeah, I had a little John boat, and I would disappear literally from dawn to dusk. And yeah, and we had made great friends. I had friends that are still friends, 50 years later, that we're still close with, that we still consider family, and just love them dearly. And yeah, actually, I met my first wife on Nettles Island. It was 1974. She was 10 years old, and we became friends with her family, her older brother, and eventually we started dating, and we stayed together for a long time. And then
you married. So
we did get married. We got married in 1985. So I knew her 11 years prior to our marriage, and then we stayed married until 2002. Okay. And that's when the death of that marriage came about. It was heartbreaking.
After 20-something years of marriage?
No, 17.
17
Yeah.
years.
3 beautiful, beautiful girls that I love dearly. It's the best thing that came.
Melissa, Jennifer, Brittany.
Best thing that came from all that was Melissa, Jennifer, and Britt. Yeah. So we're very blessed. And now we have 7 grandkids, grandchildren. Mm-hmm. My 4th daughter, Jessie, came via Georgette. She was 11 when Georgette and I met, and she became my daughter pretty instantly too. And so I was blessed to have 4 daughters, and not just the 3 from biology.
Let's backtrack a little, Scott. Let's talk about destiny. That's a big, big word, and purpose. And in high school, you were considered a beach bum by many, but you were also on the honor roll. You were the most intelligent beach bum going. Can you share about that a little bit?
I was an anomaly. So I was very much a surfer. I loved
appearances for sure.
I loved to surf. I wore, the surf garb all the time of the 1970s, the beach breeches and the t-shirts and the long hair, and and I was the only one in the National Honor Society with a 4.0 grade point average that was an absolute beach bum, and everybody would look at me as if I were, like I said, an anomaly. They would look at me like, who is this person? It was quite interesting. It was actually pretty amusing that people had one opinion of me, and that's been my whole life though.
Right.
People have always looked at me and had one perception. And once they got to know me, they would go, "Wow, that's why we
judge by its cover.
We never
don't know what's underneath.
We never quite expected that. No. So I like that. I like people. I like people first. I like people underestimating me.
Didn't your principal, or you played football too? Didn't you play football?
I got hurt. I got very short time, and then I ended up getting hurt and blew out a knee. Yeah, and the first time I blew out my knee I was 13. I was skateboarding behind a motorcycle, and I fell and broke my kneecap and tore all the ligaments. And then I started playing football in 10th grade against my doctor's advice, and I ended up blowing it out again. And they were actually, thank God my father worked for the school board, and that he had met people that were friends with the Miami Dolphins football program. because he ended up finding an orthopedic surgeon that worked on the Miami Dolphins football players, or I would have never had the I would have never been able to do the things that I do. I had a doctor that wanted to fuse my knee because the damage was so bad. And my father said, no, we're not doing that.
Divine intervention.
Yeah, he went down. He went down and found a guy by the name of Robert Niles down in Miami. And Dr. Niles took us on as a special project, did an experimental surgery on my knee, and used a procedure that hadn't been used, or that he hadn't used. And yeah.
You've had
so 45 years later, yeah, we're still on that same knee.
A lot of divine appointments. You've had a lot of near-death experiences.
Yeah.
And as a kid growing up with all that freedom, you've had a lot of close calls. And when you tell me some of the stories, my mouth drops. I do want to say, because this was another life-threatening thing. You were in the river fishing, right? And you got your leg all of a sudden.
Well, that was much later in life. Yeah, that was a different experience. Well, we can touch on that if you want.
Yeah, let's.
So I was fishing.
Jump a little.
I was fishing, and I was fishing in Sebastian, Florida. This was in
before I knew you.
Yeah, before you and I met. So this was in like 1997, 1996, 1997, and I contracted a flesh-eating bacteria.
Very random.
In my leg. I was one of 13 people in the United States to have contracted this flesh-eating bacteria.
And it was devastating.
It was devastating. And by the grace of God, I had a Dr. Bernard Korecki, who specialized in infectious diseases. He was
give up.
He didn't know. He didn't leave. We didn't leave. We didn't leave until he figured out what was going on and ended up getting me.
The books open.
He had. Yeah, we were hours. We were hours together in dozens of cultures until he finally figured out what was going on. But that was a divine appointment. He absolutely saved my leg. He probably saved my life.
Not probably.
Said, Dr. Korecki, if you're listening to this, you're the man. You did good, and I really appreciate you. So, but yeah, he didn't give up. He just kept going. So, all right. So let's backtrack. So high school, I graduated high school, and I started Indian River Community College. I was lifeguarding out at Nettles Island, which was paradise. And
even now you run into the kids older.
Kids that I taught how to swim. Yeah. So now they're all 50 years old, 45. So, but and life was really good, and then it wasn't. June 2nd, 1980, woke up, had breakfast with my mom and dad, and said goodbye.
To your dad? You were talking to your dad and mom, and
told him I loved him. I'd see him for lunch. And those were the last words that I ever said to him. He, by the time I walked from my house to my job, which was less than a minute, my dad had collapsed and had a heart attack. And I gave him CPR for an extended period of time until the ambulance got there, but he never came back. Mm-hmm. And
suddenly,
it was, to say life altering was would be a grave understatement.
Yeah,
it was hands down the most difficult thing that I ever went through. And for many, many years, I blamed myself for his death because I wasn't able to save him.
Yeah.
I
didn't even know that.
Here I was a lifeguard. Here I was trained in CPR and responsible to help other people live, but I couldn't help him live. And that was really the end of childhood, and it was absolutely the end of my mom. My mom gave up the will to live
You were
after
17,
that.
Scott?
No, I was 18. It was just before my 19th birthday. And my mom gave up the will to live. And it's funny because through that event, there is a space of about 2.5 or 3 years that I have literally no recall. Glimpses, just little glimpses. I buried myself in alcohol and marijuana, and really was just in a spiral, in a horrible, terrible spiral.
This is after you graduated high school?
After I graduated high school, I was in Indian River Community College.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I have no idea how I ever got my AA degree from Indian River Community College. I was such a mess at that point in time. I just couldn't function. I was lost. My mom was lost. Our whole family was lost. Our whole family was just in disarray. And
Walt and they're on their own at this point. They've already.
My brother Walt was married and had babies at that point in time. Yeah, my sister Lynn was, married and divorced and was going through. My niece Lisa had myelocytic leukemia at the time, and she's another miracle story by the grace of God, that she survived. She was the first one in the country to survive having her own bone marrow harvested and put back into her. God preserved her life, but he took Dad's, and I think Dad would have happily given that exchange. So, graduated IRCC at the time, and went up to go to school at Florida State University because I am a huge Seminole fan. Go Noles. Thank you to my brother Walt.
Yes.
He brought me up right. So he trained me. They lived in Tallahassee at the time. So we went up there and started school. And again, I was a hot mess. I was just a lost person. Debbie and I were in a very serious relationship at that point in time. And when I went away to school, I was kind of lost on that. You talk about marrying, out of fear. So I didn't, it was the same thing. It was, you had this person that you loved dearly, and then you were away, you're 6 hours away. It was a very difficult time. As a matter of fact, it was probably college years are supposed to be your happiest years of your life.
Yeah.
These weren't even remotely close to the happiest years of my life. Right. These were just horribly difficult times.
Can we do a side trip for just a second?
Sure.
Remember you telling me that your dad, one of the good things that he taught you, excellent work ethic. And I remember, I don't know if you were just coming out of being sick and he brings home this lawnmower.
Yeah, I'll tell you that story.
Yeah, tell us that story.
So my dad,
and then your endeavor at college with Walt.
Yeah, my dad was a Depression era kid, and he survived the Depression, and then he went to war in World War II, and was all throughout the Pacific, and he saw a lot in his life. He endured a lot in his life. Anyway, I told you earlier about my experience with my broken knee playing football. And I became a couch potato because I couldn't do anything else. I was on crutches for 9 months. Oh, wow. And so my dad comes home from work one day after I got off the crutches and was still sitting on the couch watching soap operas in the afternoon. And he said, "I've got something for you." And he walked me outside and he opened up the back of his truck and he had a lawnmower and an edger in the back of his truck. And I said,
I wish I could see your face.
I said, "We already have a lawnmower and an edger." And he goes, "Nope, those are mine. These are yours. You owe me $50. Now get to work. Now get to work." So that was my introduction to the job force. So
your business just took off.
It did.
You made a lot of money.
Yeah, I did.
At that young age.
And thank God, because he made me save half that money. Mm-hmm. And later, much later, when I got hurt again, went right before the girls were born, that money is the only thing that kept a roof over our head.
Isn't God
So
good?
yeah, it's funny. It's very interesting how God prepared the way, how my dad prepared the way, how, it was very interesting.
And then at college, you and Walt,
we had a hot dog wagon, Wally's weenie wagon.
Weenie wagon.
And it was a lot of fun. We did those are happy memories from college,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun. So, but yeah, we would sell. I had a little New York style hot dog cart. Actually, Walt had a little New York style hot dog cart, and I would run it for him. And we would set up on campus during lunchtime, and then we would set up for the football games and the baseball games. And yeah, it was a lot of work, tremendous amount of work, but it was a lot of fun. You got to meet a lot of cool people, and yeah, it was very interesting. So it was a lot of fun.
All right, so back to Debbie and you.
Well, while I was away at college, I found out that while I was being faithful, she was not. And I was devastated.
Dating years.
This is during our dating years. Yeah. And, yeah, it was devastating. And then shortly thereafter, I was in my senior year in school. My mom came up to visit and she ended up having an appendicitis attack. And she was in the hospital after the surgery. And while she was in the hospital after the surgery, she had a massive stroke.
Jeez.
And
this is still up in Tallahassee?
This is in Tallahassee, yeah. She was still up in Tallahassee. And she ended up paralyzed on her whole left side. So she lost the use of her left leg, lost the use of her left arm. Thank God it only had limited effect on her ability to communicate and her ability to think, but it left her needing care. She couldn't get in and out of a chair. She couldn't get in and out of bed. She couldn't get in up and down off the toilet. She couldn't, and we had a couple of choices, really two choices. One was to place her in a nursing home. The other was for me to leave school and to come home and help her. And again, at that point in time in my life, I was a mess. And I really just, all I really wanted to do was come home, And so the choice was made that I would move back, that Mom and I would move back to Jensen Beach. And
you were a month shy from graduating, 2 months?
I was in my last semester. I was, and
college. Okay.
I was just finishing my bachelor's degree. So I had 12 credit hours short, when I left. So actually I was interning with the Tallahassee Police Department, which would have fulfilled the obligation. Okay. And then, yeah, we left. And
you were home taking care of Mom.
We were home taking care of Mom and went to work, close. I started lifeguarding again at Nettles Island, and Debbie and I rekindled our relationship. And 1985, we got married. We bought a house in Port St. Lucie, and Mom and Debbie and I moved into the house in Port St. Lucie in June of 1986. I was working at a Hardee's restaurant, and I slipped and I fell on an ice patch, and I ended up herniating discs in my lower back. Yeah, Debbie was 6 months pregnant at the time with twins. And
that's when that money helped that time?
Yeah, so we had Mom at home. We had Debbie pregnant with the twins, and me literally unable to work flat on my back. And it was amazing to see how God provided throughout that whole period, though. There was after the twins were born, they were born September of 86. And our church family just kind of adopted us,
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, Christmas, groceries, we didn't have anything. I went through all the money that I had saved from the lawn mowing business and throughout our time. And we were just trying to do the best we could just to survive. I remember sitting on the floor in our little house, and Mom and the babies were fed, and Debbie and I sitting and eating saltine crackers and peanut butter because that was the only thing we had left in the house. And nothing. When I'm telling you, nothing. And yeah, it was interesting times. So I was still not, workman's comp would not release me to go back to work. So I started working under the table at a Domino's Pizza, delivering pizzas. And then I started working as a paper boy. I was delivering, I had the route put under Debbie's name. And I started workman's comp. Workman's comp didn't pay me for 18 months. It was unbelievable. Yeah, we went 18 months without a paycheck, without anything, without any income coming in. And all they were trying to do was just starve us out. And yeah, it was terrible. So again, by the grace of God, we found our way through it. One of the
days were long. You had early newspaper.
One of the funny stories. Yeah, it was interesting because I would work at Domino's, and then I would go and do the newspaper delivery, and then Debbie would go to work in the morning she was a dental assistant, and I would take care of the twins throughout the course of the day.
That's one of the stories you had.
It was an interesting time. It's amazing how little sleep a person can operate on and still survive. So, but yeah, it was interesting time. So, and then we ended up bringing another person into our house. My niece Amy was having struggles at home. And Amy, if you're ever watching this, I love you very much and I'm proud of you. My niece Amy was having struggles at home. She was 15 at the time. And she called me up and said, Uncle Scott, I'm running away. I go, no, you're not. I ended up picking her up at a bus station and brought her home. And we built a room in our carport, closed in our carport, built a room. So Amy had her own room to go to.
You're taking care of Amy.
So we took care of, we had my mom.
Wife.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. Yeah, with no income. I mean, little or no income. Then, it was, it was an interesting time. So,
so you're still doing the restaurant businesses?
I was still, yes. So after I finally got cleared to release to go back to work, I started working. I did a job for a company called Tri-County Tech, and I was a job training specialist for mentally challenged adults. And we would teach them cleaning skills, janitorial skills. So we would go into various businesses and we would teach them janitorial skills, and then we would find job placements for them in the community. One of the most rewarding jobs I ever had. But I couldn't pay the bills. Nonprofits don't pay very well. I couldn't afford to stay there. Went back into the restaurant industry. I was working for a terrible company called Little Caesars Pizza. And I was a district manager for Little Caesars Pizza. And tough life. Man, I was always either on the road or at work. And Debbie shouldered a tremendous amount of the burden at that point in time. And for that, I'll be all forever be grateful, because she really stepped up and really shouldered a lot of the burden. And I was miserable, absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
So
hours.
Yeah.
Being away.
We were praying, and I didn't have a relationship with God at that time, but I knew enough to get on my knees. And I said, man, something's got to change. And my brother Walt was still working for the Tallahassee Police Department at that point in time. And God put it on my heart that I needed to call and talk to the chief of police up there. And I did. I made a phone call. And lo and behold, next thing I know. So if you call a large metropolitan police department and you ask to talk to chief of police, it's kind of like calling the White House and asking to talk to the president. The chances of that happening are remote at best.
There's layers.
And usually you have to run through a series of interferences in order to talk to anybody with any type of authority.
I called that day.
But I called that morning. Walt had known the secretary, knew the secretary, and God bless her, she put me right through. And next thing I know, I'm talking to Chief Mel Tucker, and I told him what was happening in our life. He had remembered me from Walt and from when we were interning up there, and I said, "Listen, I really want to be a police officer." And he said, "How fast can you get here?" I go, "How fast do you need me?" He goes, "I have a police academy starting in 4 days.
4 days.
If you can be here in 4 days, I think I can get you in."
With your mom, your niece, your twins.
Yeah, actually, at that point in time, yeah, and the Amy was still with us. Yep, she moved out when we moved from Port St. Lucie. So I went to work. Like I said, we were still working. I was still working at Domino's part-time. And I talked to a young man by the name of Tim. He was the manager there, and asked him if he knew anybody that wanted to buy a house. And lo and behold, he did. And it was him. So believe it or not, we went to an office supply store the next day, got a contract, a sale of purchase of the house, filled out the contract on our kitchen table. And he wrote me a check for the down payment. And then we used that check for the down payment to go and get a rental truck. And we rented a truck. And 72 hours later, we were in Tallahassee.
Yes.
As we were unloading, as we were pulling into Tallahassee, the original plan was to stay with Walt, my brother Walt, my sister-in-law Barbara, and their kids until we could find a place to stay, until I could start with the police academy and start getting paid and find a place to stay. Well, at this point in time, the workman's comp had settled. I had settled my claim with workman's comp, so I had some cash in the bank. But so we go up to Tallahassee, we pull in, and there's a lady there by the name of Sonia Chapman, and she's a realtor. And she says to me, she goes, I said to her, "We're looking for a house." And she goes, "I have one." I go, I'm ready to go put a sign on a house right now. Yeah. And I'm ready to go put a sign on a house right now. It hasn't even been advertised or listed yet. The guy was asked to move for his job. It's under market value, but it's a mess. So literally we drove over in the work truck, in the moving truck, and
from Port St. Lucie,
and went over and looked at this house and ended up buying the house. So yeah, it was hilarious. Yeah, a serious divine appointment. So we did move in with Walt and Barb for about 5 or 6 weeks until the house was cleaned up and we could move in and everything was done. And then we ended up moving into our house on Bend Boulevard, which is a beautiful little ranch with bricks and a built-in swimming pool in the backyard. And I absolutely loved this house. I started the police academy. Actually, the police academy that I didn't start 4 days. So we got up there and I was not able to get into that police academy. So I went back to my old standby Domino's Pizza to make money while the police academy came around, while the next police academy came around.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
This has to do with another divine appointment. You were at a crossroads.
Oh, huge crossroads.
You had a huge offer. Well, large, massive, financially best offer to be an entrepreneur and do a restaurant. Mm-hmm. Can you describe that?
Sure. So it's funny how when God has a purpose and a plan for you, the devil will put up an imposter or something that looks as if
or better,
as if it would be better. So after speaking with Chief Tucker, we made the decision. Shortly thereafter, I mean, within hours, I get a phone call from a man from my past, and he's opening up a franchise of restaurants, Bojangles chicken restaurants, and he wants me to be to open the restaurants and also to manage what he had planned on being 5 to 6 restaurants. His offer was 3 times higher,
money-wise,
financially, than what I would have started as a police officer.
That's a lot to take in, Scott.
So you have the opportunity to stay in your house in a community that you're familiar with, making significantly more money,
Huge money.
or you have the choice of uprooting your
Into
family,
the unknown.
hauling up, starting something completely and totally new.
But your gut, right? And you had
God spoke very specifically, and we took the right choice.
Divine appointments confirm that this was God's path for you.
Yeah, because within a year, his restaurant chain was completely upside down and out of business, and we would have been swimming upstream. So yeah, it's funny how, like I said, when God has a purpose and a plan for you, devil will throw up things that make it look very appealing to go another direction. Don't listen to him.
And another thing, I don't know when this happened, around the same time or not, but you also were at a crossroads in your mind and your heart. You had a heart to serve. You wanted to help, and you were seriously thinking of nursing too, weren't you?
That was.
So it was nursing or law enforcement.
Well, nursing evaporated due to affirmative action. So I passed the applied health sciences test with flying colors, but
so God kept the door closed for you.
Yeah, I was not permitted to enter school because of affirmative action. Yeah, they had specific people that they were looking for, and I was not one of them. So
closed door.
Another closed door.
Way God directs our steps.
But that was prior.
Where you're supposed to be.
That was prior to the phone call, and prior to that was, when I was moving out of one season and moving back into the restaurant industry. I explored the nursing program. Yeah. So
and you have that heart to serve. I love that.
So we ended up in Tallahassee, and I loved it. And when I'm telling you, I loved it. I became a police officer.
And the community loved you.
Well, I integrated very well into. It's funny because growing up, I was in a predominantly white, well, all white, middle school, high school, neighborhood, and no diversity.
Hollywood, Florida.
Yeah, when I'm telling you, no diversity. I had the only diversity we experienced was we were close to the Seminole Indian reservation, and I had friends that were members of the Seminole Indian tribe that I went to school with. But as far as any type of
other cultures,
none. Right. Mm-hmm. So we go to work in Tallahassee, and I'm assigned into a predominantly African American neighborhood. And it was quite the culture shock, but it ended up being one of the best experiences of my life. Well, not initially. I fought for about the first 6 months. I was in a fight every single night. They tested. It's funny because everybody, it doesn't matter white, black, pink, green, yellow. The only thing anybody ever really cares about is, are you going to treat me fairly and equitably? It's
true.
And they tested to see if I was going to treat them fairly and equitably. And, it was interesting. It was great fun. It was a tremendous amount of fun. I made great friendships.
You learned about a lot of delicious food.
Wonderful experiences. Wonderful experiences. And yeah, we made a lot of impacts in that neighborhood. And it was during that time. So I was in Tallahassee just at 3 years with the Tallahassee Police Department. And
Mom's still living with you, right?
At this point in time, Mom was not living with me.
Started to decline?
Mom stayed. When we moved up to Tallahassee, she didn't want any part of that.
Okay.
So we had people that came in and moved in with her in her house. Actually, Barbara's mother and father, my sister-in-law Barbara's mother and father came in, and then Mom came up for another visit to Tallahassee and had another stroke while she was in Tallahassee again. She hated after the first stroke, she never wanted to go back, and then when she did come back, she ended up having another stroke. That was horrible. We were sound asleep, and all of a sudden I just hear her yelling my name, and I go in the room, and she can't see, she can't hear, she has no recognition. She's screaming, and it was heartbreaking for my daughters too, for Melissa and Jennifer to see that, because they loved her very much. And at that point in time, we couldn't take care of her anymore. So she ended up in full-time care for a long time.
Mhm.
That was early 2001. And she ended up in a nursing home until, 2011, when she passed away, September 20th, 2011. So,
2011.
mhm.
Well, we met at the end of, what year did we meet? 2000.
No, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You're right, Georgette. I'm sorry.
Something
2000. I'm getting wrong. 2001. I apologize.
Oh, good. We all getting older.
Yeah. Yeah. She passed September 20th, 2001. She passed.
Because I didn't get to meet him.
No, you didn't. Anyways, so she had the other stroke up there, and shortly thereafter, my marriage started to deteriorate. And Debbie was very unhappy in Tallahassee. I was very happy in Tallahassee. I was close to my brother. I was close to my nephews. I had a job that I absolutely, positively loved, was passionate about it. And she said, I'm leaving. And you have a choice. You can either stay here and do what you're doing, or you can come back to Jensen Beach and we can try to work on our marriage. So at that point in time, I tearfully submitted my resignation to the Tallahassee Police Department and came down here, and I started working. You know what, though? I look back now, and God had a plan for all of it.
Sure did.
So I started submitting applications, and lo and behold, I ended up with the Port St. Lucie Police Department. February 13th, 1992. And we started that journey. Tallahassee, or Port St. Lucie, was just a little sleepy town at that point in time. Had a population of about 35,000. Not much going on. It was pretty sleepy. And August of 1992, I sustained a significant injury on the job. I ended up having my kneecap kicked out in a fight.
Ouchie.
But again, God used it for good, So I had my kneecap kicked out, and I ended up in a light duty assignment where after the surgery and after the recovery, they ended up putting me in a light duty assignment where I was assigned to the Detective Bureau.
Okay.
And while I was in the Detective Bureau, they were in need of somebody to do investigations involving children. And my initial response was, yeah, no, but thank you, and my boss, Peggy Barcelona, persisted. And she said, you really need to think about this. And I said, okay. And the rest is kind of history. So over the next 4 years, we started
a new program.
So when you look now and you see shows like To Catch a Predator or internet crimes against children, there was nobody doing that in 1993. So I got back to work. August of 92, I got injured. Got back to work at the very end of 92, December, right around there, in a temporary assignment in the Detective Bureau. And I started working crimes against children, and actually found out that I was pretty good. Really pretty good.
Intuitively wise, you had intuition.
And pretty good to the point that I was recognized as an expert witness in crimes against children, sexual and physical abuse. I testified in cases. And even now, I still have contact with the families of people that I helped. But the thing that you were talking about was the internet crimes. At that point in time, the internet was in its infancy, and we started doing, the funny part about criminals is they're always thinking of ways to do what they want to do without being caught. Well, the internet at that point in time had no policing. There were no rules. America Online was a free-for-all. You could go into chat rooms and talk to anybody about anything. And if you were interested in, 7-year-old boys, you could find hundreds of other people that were interested in 7-year-old boys. It was sick. So I started using it as a tool for phishing. And I would engage these individuals thinking that I was one of them.
They thought you were.
And then I would identify them through subpoenas and then send the information to the local police departments. And then eventually it became, at this point in time, there still were no laws. There were no federal laws in violation of it. There were no state laws written of it. And we ended up having a case in Port St. Lucie that I worked with the United States Treasury Department. And it ended up being actually making case law, where they actually created case law based on this investigation. So it was very rewarding, very, very interesting, very, very rewarding. I worked hundreds of cases.
Protecting our children.
And yeah, it's funny because I didn't recognize the correlation between my experience as a young man, as a young child, and then how that kind of fueled forward everything I did from that point forward. When I got into this, it was full tilt. I mean, when I'm telling you full tilt, it was full tilt. Nothing else mattered. Sadly, because my family suffered. My wife suffered. My children suffered because I was full tilt. And there was really no balance at that point in time.
You were highly sought after.
I was
successful.
I was work. And I thought I was Don Quixote against the windmills. I really felt like I was making a difference, and I think to some people I did, but to the most important people, I ended up causing them pain. So, yeah. And for that, I'm sorry. And then my littlest one, Brittany, was born 1994. And actually, life was pretty good. I went through a really difficult time professionally.
That was another God thing.
Another God thing. So in 1996, I was promoted to the rank of sergeant. Like I said, I was a pretty good detective. And 96, I was promoted to the rank of sergeant, December 20th, 1996. And shortly thereafter, they brought me back in to the detective bureau as a sergeant in the detective bureau. And I was supervising the other detectives at that point in time. And for circumstances that we won't discuss here, that chapter of my life came to a close abruptly when I went head to head over something I thought was an injustice to one of my police officers, actually to two of my detectives. I thought that somebody had done an injustice against them within the police department, that they had targeted them for personal gain. And I went to battle. And that battle ended up costing me my detective job. So I ended up getting transferred. I ended up getting transferred out of the detective bureau and went back to road patrol. And it was devastating because I was, like I said before, I was full tilt. I was all in. It was who I was, and it was my identity. And to have that stripped away, I was so hurt, so angry, so mad, and just hate-filled. When I'm telling you hate-filled. And I was put on patrol right after I got transferred, like within a week or so after I got transferred back to the patrol unit. I get a radio call of a gentleman having passed out in his front yard. And when the radio call came out, I was literally 3 doors down from where he was. I literally turned my head to the left and saw him laying in his front yard.
Oh my God.
Myself and another officer, Mike Peath, ended up going over there and giving the gentleman CPR, and he ended up living.
You saved him.
Yeah.
God used to save him. He had a mission right away.
At this point in time, I was still so angry. I didn't recognize God's hand, and it wasn't until I was actually studying. I had to do a portfolio for my bachelor's degree to finish my bachelor's degree. And as I was going through all the paperwork, my police files, I come across the letter of transfer, and all those feelings of anger and hate come right back up, and injustice.
Yeah.
And then the very next thing I turn to is the life-saving award, and I recognize the date. I recognize the date being like a week. And it was at that point in time that God said, "Listen, dummy, it wasn't them. It was me. I put you there for a specific reason." Yeah, it was mind-blowing when God revealed that to me. I was like, holy cow, you got to be kidding me. So every time you go through something you think is a horrible circumstance, just think at some point in time, in retrospect, you'll look back and you'll go, man, God had a purpose and a plan. Because God certainly had a purpose and a plan that day.
And this was when we were married.
Yeah.
So the thing is, too, we're coming to that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start a relationship with Jesus, the first thing it does is make sure you understand how loved you are. And then it starts removing the layers of onion skin, as I call it, layer by layer, and he reveals truth. And that truth brings healing and understanding and freedom. Right? Yeah. So he had to show you that. So it's one burden he took off of you.
Yeah.
And then, well, I don't know if you want to go there now, but in the master's program.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
So that's another one.
But anyways, so I got transferred out of the Criminal Investigations Bureau in the latter part of 1998. So it wasn't until 2003 that I actually recognized God's hand in that. So after I got transferred out of the Detective Bureau, I opened up a private investigations business, and I was working full-time at the police department, and I was running the private investigations business. And at that point in time, my family really got neglected.
Because that one, the business blew up too.
The business thrived. Yeah.
And you were making good money.
And making very good money, and
traveling a lot.
Had a decision that I had to make there too, and it was made for me. During that time period, I found out that my wife wanted a divorce. Debbie asked for divorce. And that was in June of 2002. And the business was thriving. I was still working full-time as a police officer. But we were broke as a joke, and I have no idea where the money was going. I still, to this day, have no idea where the money was going. Yeah, because I was making well into six figures, and the first figure wasn't a one. And so anyways... so after that broke, I knew I had to keep the police department going in order to have health insurance and stability. The private investigation business was feast or famine. Mm-hmm. 1 month you'd make, $15,000-$18,000. The next month you'd make nothing, so it was completely and totally inconsistent. Yeah. So I needed something more stable for the kids, with a schedule that was more stable for the kids. Mm-hmm. And so we closed the private investigations business in 2002, and I ended up
you thrived in the traffic division.
Well, that was another story, but that's a different story. Yeah, we did thrive in the traffic division. That was after you and I met. So 2002, I closed everything down. And really, it was the first time that I'd ever been forced to my knees in surrender. Because I was lost. I was devastated, never saw the divorce coming, had no expectation of it. Just never saw it. I was praying a lot, and I was in church.
Was that at the church?
I was in church a lot, yeah. And it was the first time that I'd ever really stopped to listen to God. I always did a lot of talking, but I just didn't do a lot of listening. And it was a difficult time. Yeah. And then 2002, latter part of 2002, we met. And after my divorce, we started courting. And that was.
And God gave you, because he directs us, and especially in those painful moments when things are broken and things are dying. Marriage, we call divorce a living death because it's dying and it's horrible to go through.
But
you had asked God, do you want me to persevere here? Is this going to be do we work through this?
Yeah.
Or is this a shut door?
Yeah.
Is this a closed chapter in my life? And you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we stayed fast.
God answered your prayer and gave you I guess you can summarize it, but he gave you the clear direction that
we stayed.
Doors.
So at that point in time, I was spending a lot of time listening, meditating, praying, and he spoke very specifically and very clearly, and he revealed things that
you didn't know.
No, I didn't know, nor anybody else knew. And it was, if you don't think God actually talks, you need to listen, because he actually talks. You might not hear it verbally. Mine came in like dreams. I would see visions, and the visions ended up being true. It's funny because I was close friends with a pastor, and after God would reveal certain things to me, I would go to him and I would say, listen, God showed me this in a dream. And he thought I was absolutely crazy. And then within a couple of weeks, sure enough, the dreams became reality, and they came to fruition. And after
another thing too, car alarm.
After a couple of experiences like that, I wasn't going to discuss that.
Yeah.
So
God pretty much said things were going on you didn't know, and this is why the marriage is.
So at that point in time, I switched churches, and I started going to a non-denominational church. This is when I left the Lutheran religion and went to a non-denominational church, and we started going pretty regularly, actually every Sunday. And every Sunday I sat in the same spot, and I kept noticing a young lady and her daughter sitting several rows in front of me. And I went to introduce myself to her one Sunday and got sidetracked. She walked right past.
Your friend had to talk to you.
The next Monday, I go to work at the police department, and there's a young lady by the name of Eileen Fitzgerald.
Thank you.
She was a secretary, and she said, I have a friend that I think you would really like to meet. And I said, really? And she said, yes, I do. And she gave me that young lady's number. Well, I called that young lady, and lo and behold, first question out of her mouth is, where do you go to church? And I said, I go to Morningside Church. And she goes, me too. I go, I know who you are.
And I was shocked.
Yep, it was the same.
I had met up to that point. I was the one talking.
Same girl. Jesus, so. Same girl that I was going to introduce myself to on Sunday, and was the same girl that I was talking to that following Monday. So again, if you don't think God has divine appointments in mind for you, I could go through a dozen of them and let you know that he absolutely does. Actually, one of the coolest ones came about right after that. So we were really pouring into God at this point in time, like I'd never poured into God before. And when I'm telling you, pouring in. And I met a friend of mine, one of the guys that I grew up with at Nettles Island, also became a police officer in Port St. Lucie, Don Paris. And he and I were standing outside of a mobile gas station. Well, here, let me backtrack. Several days prior to that, I had been in a Christian bookstore in Jensen Beach, and there was a gentleman in the Christian bookstore in Jensen Beach, and he was trying to sell wooden crosses. And God put it on my heart to talk to this man so strongly, and I failed. I didn't. And I watched him walk out the door and walk right past, and God God convicted me so severely that I actually went back into my police car and I actually cried. And I prayed to God at that point in time, Lord, if I was supposed to say something to this man, please give me another opportunity. Please give me another opportunity. 3 days later, Don Paris and I are standing in a mobile gas station in Port St. Lucie, and I hear a voice speaking behind me. And I turn around, and it's the same gentleman that was in the Christian bookstore. His name was Bill. And I said to him, I waited for him outside. Don Paris and I waited for him outside the mobile gas station. And when he came out, I said, I don't know if you recognized me or not, but I was in the Christian bookstore the other day. God put it on my heart that I really needed to pray for you. And he started to cry. So the three of us actually sat in the park, in the gas bay of the mobile gas station with our arms wrapped around each other. And we started praying. And when I'm telling you praying, like vigorously praying for this gentleman, right? And he was going through marital difficulties at the time. And he was going through severe financial difficulties at the time. So we poured in. When I'm telling you, poured into him. And everybody gave each other a hug after we left. And that was the end of it, or so I thought. About 3 weeks later, I'm sitting in my office, in the traffic office at the police department, and I get a phone call from this woman by the name of Karen. And I pick up the phone, and the first things out of her mouth was, you don't know me, but you know my brother. And I go, and who's your brother? Bill. And I knew the last name. And she began to tell me that he was suicidal, that he was barricaded inside of his house, and that he was going to kill himself.
And you were the only one he wanted
and
to talk to.
I was the only person that he was going to talk to. So I go over there, and against every bit of our training and against every bit of common sense, I end up walking up to this guy's door. He's got weapons. But I ended up talking to him through the door shortly, and then ended up going in and walking in, and we sat and talked. And he and I cried together for probably 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And he ended up walking out with me.
Alive. With no one else hurt.
No, nothing else hurt. Nobody else damaged.
God is so powerful. So
it was an unbelievable experience. Mm-hmm. And we ended up getting him the help that he needed. His marriage was restored. The last time I talked to him, which was the only time I talked to him after that, he had moved back to New York, and he and his wife were working on it. And I would see his sister occasionally in and about the city. And it was just an amazing experience, but how God restored the opportunity to meet him, and then the opportunity to pray for him, and then the opportunity to witness to him, and then eventually to talk him off a ledge. I felt so humbled that God would use me in such a way that it would have that type of an impact on somebody's life, And it was mind blowing. When you go back and look, you could see how God orchestrated literally every event in your life, the tiniest things, specifically for you to serve him. If you're willing. Yeah. Sadly, I wasn't willing originally, but he brought that opportunity back around again.
We're going to start to close up here and summarize and to end, because we're running out of time. We could talk forever. And actually, Scott and I do believe you're going to be back on Junk to Jewels with Georgette Beck quite often, because you have many, many heart stories to share. And then we have many stories to share from our marriage and our journey, our second chance. But I wanted to just come back full circle because, and we're going to talk about this in the future and in a future book too. But God did a healing. He showed you what you were carrying since 18 years old at the Masters. He brought us to college. Scott was done with college when he graduated, got his bachelor. God brought that back up to him. And in full circle, he graduated, and then Scott thought he was done. But then he ended up marrying someone who had great desire for higher education. And he brought us to a master's program of, human service. What's our degree in?
Human services.
Human services, marriage and family counseling. And during that program, you had me during one of your courses.
Nope.
It was during one of the courses you had a paper to write, and
it was the Southern Police Institute for when I went to Kentucky.
So that's a whole story in itself of how you ended up there. But real quick, during one of those courses, he emails me and says, "Can you review this paper?" And I'm reading it, and God just gave me such discernment. I was overcome with discernment. I called him up and I said, "Scott, do you not know what you just wrote? You've been carrying such a thing." And then when Scott went to go reread the paper, God showed that to you to lift that away from you. Guilt.
In 2008, I went to live on the campus of the University of Louisville for about 3.5 months at a police executive management school. And during that course, during that time period, it was all master's classes. And I had a paper that was due, and it was called "What Makes Me Me?" And it was going back and doing exactly what I kind of did today, your earliest recollections, and going through and recognizing those things in your life that were significantly formative. And it was at that point in time that Georgette recognized that, from 1980 to 2008, I had always carried this guilt of not being able to save my father, of taking responsibility for my father's death, and not being able to.
You came to
get through it. It was a new truth. It was an eye opener.
So when there was and you had all the training in the world, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. When it's someone's time to go see Jesus, they're going to go see Jesus, and
it's an eye-opening experience.
That was a healing moment.
Well, Georgette, we've only touched about a quarter of this.
So, viewers, listeners, we hope you consider checking out the book, Junk to Jewels, A Journey from Brokenness and Despair to Beauty and Delight. And then someday follow us. So follow us on Instagram and Facebook, Scott and I. Check back with this show because Scott's going to be back, and we're going to talk about how to heal from divorce, right? And then Scott's going to share more of his stories and his journey through the law enforcement years, his fabulous career where he helped lots and lots of people in a variety of ways. But he's going to have a book someday too about all his lessons and his jewels learned, out and about serving. But your biggest Scott, there's no biggest takeaway because there's a lot. But if someone was right now, if they're a teenager or a young person that, they something tragic happened to them that suddenly their life, or, someone in their family got sick suddenly, or they lost someone, and they're in that moment where, like you were, just devastated. Maybe they don't want to live, and they're seriously thinking of things of why are they here? Or even if someone's just going through a huge depression and they don't see their value, speak to them. What kind of things, what would you say with what you know now?
God has a purpose and a plan for you. You may not recognize it right now, but take the time to not only ask, but take the time to listen, get quiet, be still. And once you become still, it allows that pathway, that conduit for God to communicate with you. When you're talking, you can't listen. You can only listen when you're silent, and understand that what you're going through today will not last forever. That, trust me, man, I was there. I did not want to live. The only reason I'm sitting here talking to you today is simply by the grace of God and His love and His power. So God's got a purpose and a plan for you. This time will not last forever. Going through the divorce, I wanted to die. After the death of my father, I wanted to die, and God preserved it. So God's got a plan for you. You just got to listen and just keep pushing forward. Never quit. Never give up. Never, never, never give up. Ed Milet, just one more, just one more breath, one more step, one more minute, one more opportunity. And the other thing I can say is, man, take the focus off of you and start putting it on other people, because there is a world of folks that need help. If you start pouring into others, you'll see how quickly your life can recover, and how happy that you can be in serving. So service is the key. Gratitude is the key. Being thankful for the things that you have and for the things that God's provided for you. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for coming onto the show, Scott. I know this wasn't
I did
easy,
not want to do this today.
but you know what? I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of hearts that receive healing. And we're a show and tell, as in look what God did in our lives. Yeah. And we have so much more to share with others in the future. But
this was about half of it, if that. So
thank you, Scott, for coming. Thank you for listening and viewing. Our listeners and viewers, we appreciate you. So have a great day, everyone. And don't forget, if you're not following Georgette Beck on Facebook or Instagram, please go ahead and follow. And then please download this show and follow Junk to Jewels podcast with Georgette Beck. We have several guests coming along to share their challenging moments and their inspiration. Thank you for listening and watching. Take care.